Nelson Mandela was a revolutionary South African leader who was against apartheid. He was born on July 18, 1918 in Transkei, South Africa. In 1939, Mandela studied at Fort Hare College, where he met Oliver Tambo. There he was first confronted with the injustice of the supremacy of the whites. After a student strike, Mandela and Tambo were expelled. He met Walter Sisulu, who arranged a place at Witwatersrand University, where he finished his law studies. In 1944, he joined the African National Congress, and 2 years later he founded the Youth League of the ANC with Tambo and Sisulu. After the National Party had won the election, the ANC was forced to fight harder against apartheid. Mandela demanded the preservation of full citizenship for everyone, direct representation of all South Africans in Parliament, the right of trade unions, education and culture for everyone, compulsory school attendance for everybody. And in 1952, Mandela, who had become the president of the ANC and the ANCYL, traveled through the country to call upon the population to protest. Because of this defiance campaign, he received a 9-month suspended sentence with probation. In 1956, Mandela and others were accused of high treason, and in 1961, the defendants were set free. 1960, after the Sharpeville massacre, the ANC was forbidden. His attitude changed, and he accepted that violence was necessary. Also in 1961, Mandela founded the armed wing of the ANC, the Spear of the Nation. Because of forbidden journeys abroad, he was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. Police found documents of the ANC which incriminated Mandela and other members, and they were condemned to lifelong imprisonment. He spent 18 years of his lifetime on Robben Island, and in 1982 they were sent to Portsmouth Prison. In 1985, Mandela refused the possibility to be set free because he would have to stop fighting violently. And in 1988, he was moved to a different prison where he didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. Frederick William de Klerk became leader of the National Party and president of South Africa. He abolished the ban on the ANC. And after the pressure of the ANC and foreign organizations, and with the help of de Klerk, Mandela was released in 1990. From 1990 to 1994, after his release, he started to negotiate with all sections of the population. Mandela and de Klerk received the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1994, Mandela became the first democratically elected president of South Africa. He fought for better relationships between black and white people, and he developed a new constitution. Nelson Mandela was a good leader because he sought reconciliation with his political enemies rather than retaliation against them. This forgiving approach helped his country, South Africa, to heal from the wounded of the apartheid. Mandela looked ahead and could see that South Africa's system of apartheid would not survive into the future. From his prison cell, he strategically assessed his moves and anticipated reactions. When offered freedom in exchange for renouncing opposition to the government, Mandela rebuked President Botha. "What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? What freedom am I being offered if I must ask permission to live in an urban area?" Mandela decided to serve out his sentence rather than exchange it for the political prison of apartheid. His vision was right. The outside world recoiled against South Africa, while local business leaders and young whites pushed for change domestically. Mandela stood out among prisoners and guards as a man of principle and dignity. Willing to sacrifice his life for his beliefs, despite harsh prison life, Mandela mustered energy to challenge his keepers. He was unwilling to accept the status quo, and his presence on Robben Island held a mirror up to the face of apartheid's leaders. Through word, deed, and symbol, he challenged the system that denied him liberty. Eventually, both the successor, de Klerk, called for democratic elections, and in 1994, Mandela became president of South Africa in a very rare, peaceful, and orderly transition from white minority to black majority rule. Mandela and de Klerk shared the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for their work for the peaceful termination of the apartheid regime and for laying the foundations for a new democratic South Africa. Mandela studied the errors of Robert Mugabe and bordering Zimbabwe, whose brutal dictatorship resulted in the country's demise. He recognized that South Africa could follow in Zimbabwe's footsteps unless he practiced racial harmony. That meant forgiving without forgetting and sharing power. We have the surprise, the white minority, with restraints and generosity, he said. A master of symbolism, Mandela invited his prison guards to the presidential swearing-in ceremony. Mandela's interpretation of history was spot on. South Africa could prosper as a multiracial society only if leaders mutually forgave each other. In 1993, a white man assassinated Chris Hani, a leader of the South African Communist Party, triggering a widespread demonstration against the de Klerk government. Mandela, recently out of prison, had the guts to call for peace when people wanted revenge. He also made a courageous decision to use sports as a means of healing, believing sport has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. When the ban was lifted on South Africans' participation in the 1992 Olympics, Mandela at first opposed but ultimately decided to support the mostly white athletes. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the correct decision, Mandela said. Of the 95-person delegation, only 8 were black. I would have liked the team to be a reflection of our population, but there has to be a starting point. Mandela faced big questions after his release from prison. What to do with the faltering economy? For most of his life, Mandela was a socialist and even a Marxist. He was suspicious of free markets and private ownership, given the abuses he witnessed. He said the nationalization of the mines, banks, and monopoly industries and the policy of the ANC and a change of modification of our views in this regard is inconceivable. But then he came to learn what decades of socialism had done to the states of the former Soviet Union. His thinking took a sharp turn when he met leaders of the Communist Party of China and Vietnam who were striving to privatize state enterprises. They changed their views altogether, Mandela told a biographer. Mandela exemplifies how a strategic leader adjusts strategy and execution amid complex social, political, legal, and economic forces without compromising deeply held values. Leadership is not just about motivating people and creating political support for a strategy, but also about maintaining broad support through successive adjustments to the plan.